Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to see Lynne Edwards talk about her piece in our collection, in the Quilters Guild collection. She's going to tell you a little bit about it and about her work, and I'm going to hand straight over because there's a giant crowd waiting for not me. So we'll switch this.
Thank you. The problem is going to be when I hold something up. So somebody may have to have my microphone and do songs then. Oh, there we are. Wonderful girl. This is a piece that I made in 1998 when a child, you understand, when a child. But at the time, I did a lot of cathedral window. It was my speciality. And then it was very swiftly followed by doing a sampler quilt and then a second sampler quilt and then books about using scraps. And because when you're married to an artist, you have to find a way of making a living somehow, which I did by doing these things. But at the time, I was bewitched by cathedral window. I was shown it when I'd only just started sewing, so, I don't know, many years ago. And the woman who showed me how to do cathedral window was an embroideress. And that's important to know because at the time, the Quilters Guild didn't exist and quilting was seen purely as hexagons, whereas the embroiderers loved texture, but especially they loved thread and using all this texture. So cathedral window was really was done by embroiderers who wanted to create their own little windows with events, things happening in them. And the woman who showed me was a very charismatic lady. And she had retired from teaching very contemporary embroidery somewhere like Birmingham. And all her followers came down to Norfolk, where she now lived, and did classes. And I went on one of these classes. And we were doing Seminole, patchwork. But she didn't say, we're only doing this. Somebody mentioned cathedral window, and I said, what's that? And she said, I'll show you. That is what quilting is all about, isn't it? Very much so. But what she didn't say to me was, it's only ever done with calico and scraps, and it's really difficult. And she didn't say any of those things, so I didn't do it in calico and scraps, and I never found it difficult. And I loved it. I loved it, loved it, loved it. In those days, it was all by hand, and it was just an outlet for that marvelous rhythmic hand sewing, because the concept of putting the pieces together used to be done always oversewn as English patchwork was. And there's something, wrong hand, very rhythmic about that, which is very soothing to the soul, I think. Why are they doing it at the moment where all these magazines rabbit on about mindfulness and how important it is and how wonderful the crafts are, things like sewing and knitting, it's mindful. Well, you know, what I'm thinking about isn't mindful, it's mindless, which is what we need when your brain is dead. And that sewing, over-sewing and making order out of chaos is a marvellous thing, I think. So I loved it because one of the things about cathedral window, it's origami. It's paper folding with fabric. Fabric does not behave well. It's worse than children. Paper stands still, but of course what paper doesn't do is stretch. And if you think back to paper folding for paper napkins, you know, into the middle, turn it over, into the middle again, turn it over, into the middle, and do some manipulation, and you've got, I don't know, a water lily. But with fabric, the whole point is, if you fold this a lot, some of those folded edges are on the bias, in other words, diagonally across the fabric, which those of us who know fabric, infamously stretchy. So the idea is that that folded edge is rolled back to make a curve, which is magic, absolute magic. And by the time I did this one, I was working with different shaped and different sizes of pieces. So there will be a large square and a small square and a rectangle, which was the same as the small square this way and the same as the big square that way. Just 3 different pieces. None of those pieces, they've all been sewn together. And none of the sewing areas was all done by hand, this was. The turning through was done by machine. The joining together was oversewn. I don't do it like that now, but I haven't explored this recently. Too much else going on. Too much exciting stuff. And I think this is a case of this was then. And I will take all the credit for it. And I've given it to the Guild because I don't know what the hell to do with it otherwise. And I'm amazed that I actually did it. What I've got to show you, if you wouldn't mind leaping to, I remember you're tall, I know you are. Everybody's tall compared with me. There you go. Okay.
Right. I'm holding up, you're holding on to your...
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Tell me if I'm holding it the right way.
Yeah.
That way. Yeah.
That's it. If you just rotate with that. Now, this is the finished article, but it's on 2 layers because if you turn to the back, please, that's how it's assembled. It's folded squares. If you rotate so they can see, will be lovely. Now, if you think, just take a picture in your mind, note all those seams, which are all vertical and horizontal, just rows of squares. Now, if you turn to the front again, virtually all of those seams are hidden because where they've been joined together, an extra piece of fabric has been laid on the top, which disguises the seam underneath. Does that make sense? And in those curves, there's extra fabrics. So you've got 2 quilts. You've got the foundation, folded shapes, and you've got the windows. I'll show you another one. Well, I won't, you will. Because the big advantage of this is this shows you the finished article, okay? And again, no vertical or horizontal joinings. But if you turn it to the back, what we've got, it's difficult to see because the light's shining off it a bit, but you can see not only are there shapes, you can see there are 3 different shapes. Because when you put a rectangle against a square and another rectangle and roll edges back, it gives the illusion of 3D. Because I love geometric things. My dad was an architect, and although I was only 2nd division for maths, I do like doing drawings and that sort of thing. And I love the way it works. So I just brought these few pieces along because this piece is finished and it is backed. So I can't tell you how it's been made. I can't show you on that, but I can show you on these, which is why I brought them. Here's a couple of smaller pieces that were made before this one was. And again, I'm playing with different sizes and the flow of the 2 different colours. So the background is not one, it's a lot, which I think is quite nice because when I'm teaching lots of students, like scrap quilts, I will suggest that they don't have one background fabric throughout, but design with that as well. It's too easy just to say, and a background. The background can actually be just as important as what's going on, which is the essence of Cathedral Window, I think. 2 layers, which I really like. I also, because I have no training of any sort, I haven't even got an O-level in art in any way. I've written 5, 7 books, and I haven't got an A-level in English. So I'm hope for those who are not quite so academically aspiring. But where the border for that is linen. I have been quilting for so many years that when I started, you couldn't do so many things. You're not allowed to. And you're certainly not allowed to mix different weights of fabrics. It's just, absolutely punishable by death. So this is linen on the edge, and I have then used a bit of stencil cream, which is dry cream. It's like makeup, like a blusher. And I have taken the colour down, and then I have not quilted diagonally in that border. I have done short and long stitches with French knots occasionally, all of which I'm self-taught, and I don't care. It's fine. Those of you who know me know that these are my colours, East Anglian colours, blue greys. I love them. It should be, that's it. Yes, it is. And this is called, it's got a title. I don't usually like titles. I find them pretentious. But this is actually Dawn to Dusk. So it flows along. But because there are no obvious definitions, steps between each piece of patchwork, you can treat it like a painting. in that the colours on the underneath pieces can change, but you don't see them changing. The fabrics on the top disguise that. They make their own song. The underneath makes its own really interesting back chorus to it, which I absolutely love. So we now come on to this piece. Thank you so much, really kind. They are tagged. Although to the highest bidder, possibly. Hereby hangs a tale, because I was doing things, I was thinking about doing a sampler, I was doing more teaching to make a living and loving it, patchwork teaching, not kids anymore, but patchwork stuff, loving it. Husband, 2 sons, an income, parents living in the village, usual stuff, isn't it? And I had a phone call from the person who was then at Shipley Art Gallery. I am not a competitive quilter. I make quilts in order to enjoy and then foist them onto people and teach, because that's what I love doing. And she said, would I like to have a piece in this art quilt show? Me, art quilt. And I went, oh wow, very busy. And then I said, I listed all the things why I couldn't possibly do it because I was so busy. Because she said, we want a big quilt. We don't want something that size. We want something this size. I went, and then she told me all the awful things of her own personal life, and I felt much better. Because mine was just busy and hers was really not very nice at the time. She was being very brave and soldiering on. And then she said, now this is a wicked thing to say and so clever. She said, well, when have you had in the past a request to take part in an art quilt show in a major gallery? I thought, well, you know, steeple bumped in church hall, probably. That's about it. And she knew that, you know, if I thought, she hoped that I would feel A, flattered, and B, ambitious enough. Well, I'm not ambitious, but I thought, I don't know. And the why it worked was because that part was already made. I had got about that far. So think of it as being like that one. So it was all fluid and interesting, stronger colours, and I didn't know where to take it. So I stopped. It's the best way. Leave it alone. Just walk away. If you don't touch it for 5 years, when you take it out again, please don't call it a UFO, an unfinished thing. It isn't. It's stock. Because sooner or later, somebody will want something, and you look through your stock and say, I think that will work. And when you take it out, you're not the same person who made that block or did that piece. The fabric's changed, you've changed, techniques have changed, and you move it on in a new way, which I think is marvellous. And it's certainly not a languishing, unfinished object. It's potentially marvellous. So, needs must, I took it out and thought, if I could develop that, I could get it done in time, because I had about 6 months, 8 months. There's an awful lot of work in that. Please don't say how long did it take.
5 years this side and then 15 years this side.
Enough. Shush, you're quite right. Now, what I usually say, if somebody says how long is it, I said, I have no idea, because we do not time what we love doing. We say, I'm going to do half an hour doing this oven. Then I can get some sewing done. Oh, it'd be so lovely. So we don't time it, do we?
No.
And if it's handwork, very often, it's doing double time, because you are sitting, you are resting, you are listening to something or somebody, and they don't feel threatened if you're handworking. They do if you're on the machine. Right, you say, you look at the machine. Okay, right, fine. Oh, what do you want? What do you want? But if it's handwork, I used to go and visit my dad most days when he was an elderly gentleman, And I always took hand sewing with me because he knew then that I wasn't itching to get home and get on with something. I would sew then. And as far as I was concerned, I could sew forever, doing my duty as a dutiful daughter. Heavens above. So I don't know how long that took. It took an awful long time. If we ever timed what we had, it's all priceless in every way, isn't it? It really is. You can't put it. So just remember that, because if somebody who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about says, will you make me a quilt? Beware. Learn the script first. I'm so sorry. It's like this. Quilts take forever to make. They cost an awful lot, at least £100. And they go, what? What? And they're thinking, Marks and Spencer's, Primark, $14.99. And you say, and the trouble is that they're always, you don't make them for profit. You make them for the people that you love, implying you don't quite love them enough. And so I've got a list this long of family. I'm so sorry. And then you walk away. That's what you do. So I don't know how long it took, but I tell you what, I did it all the time because I had a deadline. I don't like deadlines. I like to have time to go back and get it right if it goes wrong, or leave it. But I did. I had to find fabric, move it on and do this part. And that is not easy when you live in a very small terraced house with not much room just to stand back. You don't have the equipment. But there's nothing like the deadline to clear the mind. So it was done, and it went to Shipley, very proud moment. I went up to see it, very proud indeed. Strangely, it wasn't hanging, it was flat, but slightly up at one side, at the top, which was very impressive, but I was in very auspicious company, I have to say. I've never done an art quilt since, but every quilt is an art quilt. Every modern quilt has come from somewhere. Every contemporary quilt, again, is touching out at different things. Traditional is where it all started, and it can all take from all of them. It's one huge textile pleasure, I think. But of course, when this is done, what the hell to do with it? So what I did, in fact, this is the best one. This is the best story. How long have you got? I was going to teach in Canada, at Toronto, at the quilt fair, and I thought, and they wanted a quilt for the teachers' showcase, which is what they generally do. And I've got one now that's done in set in stone ones, and it's smaller. So it's more. I took that to New Zealand because that was all right, easy to pack. This one, what you must never do with cathedral window in particular, but all quilts anyway, really, is fold them. You roll them with the right side on the outside. That's the shorter bit. So we've got a roll that's that long to go on a flight to Toronto. And at that time there was, what was it called, Air Canada. And I phoned up the Air Canada office in London. Just shows you how things have changed in that. Sorry?
Did you speak to a human being?
Oh yes. Not only did I speak to a human being, but I explained what it was, because the limit for the length was longer than it should be to go on. And I said, yes, but if you do length by width, if the area's just the same, the volume's just the same. She said, okay, she said, I can't do the accent. She said, I'll just go and speak to my colleagues. And off she went. And then she came back and she said, we have decided it's fine. If we can take skis, we can take quilts. How's that for a line? I was enchanted, absolutely lovely. So this went out, and the rest, because then you could take as much luggage as you like in those days. So this was then hanging, and when they put it in this enormous university gym in Toronto, it happened to be the prime spot. Right on the end, so that you come out and turn the corner and everything. So I then had to give a talk like this. Oh no, proper one, I mean, not people lying sitting here, the peasantry on the floor. Dear, oh dear, I know you want to worship me, but really. So I said in this talk, I said, my quilt has not got out much. It's been to Shipley and it hasn't been anywhere else at all because it's too big to go anywhere else at all. And it's too difficult for me to manhandle and take anywhere. So I said, I want you to organise it so that once an hour, 2 or 3 of you come past and stop and say, oh, that is such a great quilt. And then go on. Fine. That was simply part of the repartee in the talk. And about, I think a couple of days later, I met a group of them and they said, we're doing it. We're doing it every hour, on the hour. But that was, in a way, that's what this quilt needs. It always needs to be shown, doesn't it? All work needs to be shown. And I wish people would realise that to put a quilt in a show is not a form of showing off. And it's not a moment when you feel desperately vulnerable because somebody might criticise it. Remember that. Don't criticise publicly because it's hurtful. But what it is to share. And don't be afraid to say, I made this and I love it. And what you love is not your talent, your workmanship. What you love is the way the fabrics that you hoped would look good together do look good together in that design. And that's a total joy. And you're an audience of it as much as everybody else is. So just enjoy it. So this is why this is now with the Guild. And I did give it to them with it and the proviso that they would make it work for the Guild. So we should have had a collection box, Heather. If you like this quilt, give £1. Give £1. Give £1. So have you seen the merchandising? Ah, I'm so proud. I'm so proud. Where's my bag? Look at this. Look at this. Fantastic. But that is so clever, isn't it? So I shall walk up Bilderston High Street, my village, with my bag, and no one will realise it's anything to do with me, of course, never mind. And horror of horrors, there's a tea towel, and it's lovely. I might even wash up with it sometime, possibly. And then there's a jigsaw puzzle. I love jigsaw puzzles, but it'd be ever so hard. However, mustn't say that, must I? The marketing. It's going to be so easy. Marvellous, marvellous, absolutely lovely. So, have you any questions about this year of quilt? Because you probably won't see it again for a while, if ever.
How big is it?
God knows. I don't know. Single bed size-ish. How's that sound? I think that's probably about 5 feet-ish, and that's probably about 6 foot, 7, 6, I don't know, as is.
I love the way the pinks are coordinated. I would not have chosen all the pinks to be put together, but the way it has worked out is beautiful.
Well, the thing is, if I could take the back of this quilt off, because afterwards it has been backed and not quilted, it's tied, because the quilting isn't appropriate. The design is almost like an abstract painting. What's just what we all do all the time? We take pieces of fabric, and they're only going to be squares or rectangles, and we just think, I think these would look nice. Now, you do not need an art degree for this. You want a wall, if possible, a board. You put them up, and you stand back, and you think, I don't know, and you listen to your heart, because it's the balance. Now, anybody who makes quilts, especially if you make quilts with a group, and you see them arranging things and they ask and so forth, is seeing when you suddenly find you've got one fabric which is greedy for attention, so you need to use it in places where it just sits nicely. And that is not an abstract concept. That's put it up, look at it until your heart says, yep, then it works. So this was done with the fabric arranged like that, before any windows were thought about, and then sewn in units, oversewn, that way, and then the pieces for the windows were cut out and placed up on the wall and looked at with a pin in until it felt right. And you had to be careful because a lot on the silk. So if you turn the silk this way, it's a different colour to this way. So sometimes I got 4, all proud, come down in the morning and one of them's wrong, because I've turned it the wrong way. You can't tell. So it's a developing adventure, if you like, and it's a very personal thing, and it's not a formula. And I think I'm going to have to do some more now. I've got myself all excited. So there we are.
Yeah,
You've
okay.
got us
Normally
excited.
the cathedral, they are all same size. But how the idea came to you?
I think
Is it your idea?
nothing is ever one person's idea, ever. I think wait a minute. I have seen early Quilters Guild magazines where Deirdre Amsden, who was one of the founder members and was trained in art, she'd drawn some blocks out to show distortion, how you could pull one out and change one out. And I thought that would be interesting if you could do that, not just squares with cathedral window, but rectangles, because I like the maths of that. Making it was a swine. But I do know that there was an amazing Japanese book, because you can just see that the Japanese would love it, because there's the precision and it's the thinking about every stage and the placement. But there was also a lady in Canada who did a lot. Nothing is new.
Yeah.
And anybody who says, that's my idea, that's my technique, how dare you do that? It's all nonsense. Think of the motor car. They all came up in every continent at the same time-ish. Same with airplanes, at the same time. There is not ever an original thought. You know, there really isn't. It's just whatever. But I can teach a disappearing 9-patch to a group of 20 people, and everybody will do something, they move off. So it would be no use saying, I invented that, which of course I didn't, because they have immediately changed it and done something that's personal to them. That's what it's exciting about patchwork, because every single thing you do is original to you, isn't it? So we're very, very blessed. And you've got to write this down. It's when these smart ones say, I will finish with this because this is important. They go, oh, you make quilts. You're one of these people who cut fabric up and you sew it together again. You think, smack. And what you say is, certainly, because I am a quilt maker, I paint with fabric. I'm interested in the relationship of one piece of fabric with another fabric and the effect it has on a design. And what's hard about doing with that with fabric is that you've actually got to, you can't mix it like a painter can. You've actually got to cut it and then re-sew it to make these new relationships, by which time they are losing the will to live. And they will never ask again. It's all right. Also, you say, is there any painter has a paint box? That paint box does not remain every colour on its own. They are always mixed. And we mix, but we have to cut up in order to mix, which is far harder. By which time they have doubly lost the will to live. So there we are. Any more questions? Otherwise, you can go and spend some money.
Did you dye your fabric?
Sorry?
Did you dye your?
No, I can't bear dyeing stuff. Tiny house, and I hate getting messy. But somebody's got to be there to buy the stuff that other people have dyed. Which I have done over the years. I have spent an awful lot on fabric and also bought an awful lot of really cheap. When I started doing this, and we were really, really, poor but happy, it was all, do you remember curtain lining? Glazed cotton? £3 a yard at the most. Every nuance of shade. Shiny on one side, slightly polished, but matte on the other. And I did all my cathedral window pieces, the backgrounds, finding, I used to go to a little shop in Framlingham in Suffolk, which was piled high with stuff, and bits of a folded piece of fabric saying on it, half a yard, stapled, a little bit of brown paper stapled on the corner, 4 and 6pence, that sort of thing. Because then you got 10 shades of one colour, cheap as chips, available, because you fold it down. Each of these pieces starts out to be twice as long and twice as high. So the fabric used for the background is 4 times the area of this. It's hugely greedy of fabric. So it's not a thing to do if you're counting the pennies. This is why it was done in calico, because it was cheap. Or curtain lining.
Does that mean it's very heavy?
Yes. If you can't sleep under a cathedral window quilt, you die. You die. I mean, it's better as a wall hanging anyway, because it's too tricky. It's a purely decorative thing. And why do people paint paintings? Not because they've got a wall that needs to be covered. It's because they can't not painter painting. And I can't not use fabric and see where it takes me. That's what we do, isn't it? That's what we do. Okay? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lynne.